The distant whistle of a train rattled Eleanor Harper Davis's already frayed nerves as she clutched her carpetbag tighter, standing alone on the wooden platform of Centralia, Montana territory. The year was 1872, and she had traveled over 2,000 miles from Boston to marry a man she'd never met, a man who was nowhere to be seen. "Train's done gone, miss. You waitin' on someone?" The station master's weathered face showed genuine concern as he locked up the small ticket office. Eleanor straightened her spine, refusing to let her disappointment show. "Yes, sir, my fiancé was to meet me, a Mr. Matthew Kane." The station master's eyebrows rose. "Kane's ranch is a good ways out of town. Perhaps there was some misunderstanding about the day." "Perhaps," she replied, though the letter in her pocket clearly stated today's date. "Is there a hotel nearby where I might wait? The Silver Dollar Inn's just down the street. Tell Martha I sent you, she'll give you a fair rate." With a grateful nod, Eleanor gathered her belongings and made her way down Centralia's main street. The Montana sunset painted the distant mountains purple and gold, a beauty that would have taken her breath away had she not been so focused on her predicament. The Silver Dollar Inn was modest but clean. Martha, a plump woman with kind eyes, showed her to a small room on the second floor. "Mail order bride?" Martha asked bluntly as she handed over a key. Eleanor felt her cheeks flush. "Is it that obvious?" "Ain't many unaccompanied young ladies stepping off the train in these parts," Martha said with a knowing smile. "Who's the lucky fellow?" "Matthew Kane," Eleanor replied, watching Martha's expression carefully. "Matt Kane, well now." Martha's eyes widened slightly. "Solid man. Keeps to himself mostly. Got one of the better cattle operations in the county." Eleanor set her bag on the bed. "Do you know why he might not have met the train?" Martha shrugged. "Spring roundup keeps the ranchers busy, or could be trouble at the ranch happens to the best of them. Give it a day or two before you start worrying." "A day or two." Eleanor nodded, trying to quell the voice inside that whispered she'd made a terrible mistake. After Martha left, Eleanor sank onto the bed and pulled out Matthew Kane's letter for the 100th time. His handwriting was bold, straight lines forming precise words. "Miss Davis, your letter and photograph received. Your proposition is acceptable. I will meet your train in Centralia on May 12th. I offer a comfortable home and honest partnership. No false promises beyond that. Respectfully, Matthew Kane." Not exactly romantic, but Eleanor hadn't expected poetry. She'd advertised for a husband in the matrimonial news after her father's death left her with nothing but debts and unwanted advances from his business partner. Matthew Kane had been one of 3 respondents and the only one who seemed neither desperate nor deceptive. Eleanor carefully refolded the letter and tucked it away. Tomorrow, she told herself, he would surely come tomorrow, but tomorrow came and went with no sign of Matthew Kane. Eleanor spent the day exploring Centralia's modest offerings. A general store, a small church, 2 saloons, a sheriff's office, and an assortment of businesses catering to the surrounding ranches. By the 3rd day, her worry had turned to anger, then resignation. She was counting the money she had left, barely enough for another week's lodging and certainly not enough for a train ticket back east when Martha knocked on her door. "Someone to see you, Miss Davis." Eleanor's heart leapt. "Mr. Kane?" "No, honey, it's Jim Walsh, Matthew's foreman." Downstairs, a tall, lanky man with a weather-beaten face removed his hat as Eleanor approached. "Miss Davis, Jim Walsh, madam, I work for Matt Kane." "Where is Mr. Kane?" Eleanor asked, not bothering to hide the edge in her voice. "There was an accident, madam. Matt got thrown from his horse 3 days back while checking fence lines. He's laid up with a broken leg and some ribs. Asked me to come fetch you and apologize for not meeting your train." Relief and concern flooded through Eleanor. Will he be all right?" "Doc says he'll heal, but he's in a foul mood about it. Says to bring you out to the ranch if you're still willing or arrange for your return passage if you'd prefer." Eleanor considered for only a moment. She had nowhere else to go. "I'll come to the ranch, Mr. Walsh." An hour later, Eleanor was seated beside Walsh in a wagon heading out of Centralia. The late afternoon sun warmed her face as they traveled west, the town quickly giving way to open rangeland. "It's beautiful," she said, taking in the sweeping vistas of grassland and distant mountains. Walsh nodded. This is good country, hard sometimes, but good. How long have you worked for Mr. Kane? Going on 8 years now. Started when he first bought the place. What manner of man is he? Eleanor asked, trying to keep her tone casual. Walsh was quiet for a moment. Matt Kane's the fairest boss I've had, doesn't waste words, expects your best work but gives the same himself. Lost his wife and baby in childbirth about 5 years back, doesn't talk about it. Eleanor absorbed this information, a widower. The advertisement hadn't mentioned that. He's not much for letter writing, Walsh continued. When he decided to answer your advertisement, he had the school teacher help him compose it proper. This surprised her. Mr. Kane can't write? Oh, he can write well enough for ranch business, just doesn't have a way with fancy words. Figured a Boston lady deserved better than his usual scrawl. The Circle K ranch came into view as they crested a hill, a substantial 2-story house, a large barn, bunkhouse, and various outbuildings. A creek meandered nearby, and cattle dotted the surrounding pastures. Walsh pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house. Here we are, Miss Davis. Home sweet home if you decide to stay. Eleanor smoothed her travel-worn dress and adjusted her hat. I've come this far, Mr. Walsh. I intend to at least meet the man. The house was surprisingly well appointed inside, with solid furniture and clean, if simple, furnishings. Walsh led her to a door off the main room. Matt brought your bride, he called, then with a reassuring nod to Eleanor, left her alone at the threshold. The room was dim, with curtains drawn against the late afternoon sun. As her eyes adjusted, Eleanor made out a large 4-poster bed where a man lay propped up against several pillows, his left leg encased in a plaster cast, bandages visible around his bare torso. Matthew Kane was not what she expected. From his letters, she'd imagined someone older, perhaps in his 40s. The man before her couldn't be more than 32 or 33. His face was lean and tanned, with a strong jaw currently darkened by several days' growth of beard. Dark hair fell across his forehead, and eyes the color of a summer storm assessed her frankly. Miss Davis, he said, his voice deeper than she'd imagined. I apologize for not meeting your train. Eleanor stepped into the room. So your foreman explained. How are you feeling, Mr. Kane? Like I got trampled by a bull. Doc says I'll mend. His eyes never left her face. You're younger than I expected. I'm 22, she replied, and you're younger than I imagined as well. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. 31 last month, he gestured to a chair beside the bed. Please sit, you must be tired from your journey. Eleanor sat, placing her hands primly in her lap. I waited 3 days in Centralia. I know, I'm sorry for that. I'd have sent Jim sooner, but he was up in the north pasture until yesterday. Kane shifted, wincing slightly. You have every right to be angry. I'm not angry, Mr. Kane, merely uncertain, he nodded. Fair enough, I imagine this isn't what you pictured when you came west to marry. The directness of his statement caught her off guard. No, it isn't. Miss Davis, I don't need that letter to know you're mine. His gray eyes held her steadily. The moment I saw your photograph, I knew you were meant to be here, but our arrangement was for a healthy husband who could provide. Right now, I'm neither particularly healthy nor providing much. If you want to postpone our agreement until I'm on my feet again, I'll understand. Eleanor studied him, surprised by his frankness. Where would I go in the meantime? You're welcome to stay here. Mrs. Hawkins comes in days to cook and clean. There's a guest room upstairs that would be yours. No obligations, no expectations. She considered his offer. And if I chose to leave entirely, something flickered in his eyes, disappointment perhaps, then I'd give you the money for your return journey and wish you well. Eleanor took a deep breath. Mr. Kane, I came to Montana to marry you and begin a new life. Your current condition changes the timing, perhaps, but not my intention, assuming you still wish to marry me. For the first time, a genuine smile transformed his face. I do, Miss Davis. Though I'm afraid we'll have to postpone the ceremony until I can stand at the altar. Then I'll stay, Mr. Kane, and we'll see what happens when you're well. Matthew, he corrected. If you're staying, you should call me Matthew. Eleanor, she offered in return. Eleanor, he repeated, as if testing the feel of her name. Welcome to Circle K. The first week at Circle K was a blur of adjustment for Eleanor. Mrs. Hawkins, a no-nonsense widow in her 60s, showed her around the house and explained the rhythms of ranch life. Jim Walsh introduced her to the other ranch hands, who regarded her with a mixture of curiosity and respect. Matthew remained confined to his bed, though he insisted on being kept informed of ranch operations. Eleanor found herself bringing him meals and sitting with him, initially out of politeness but increasingly because she enjoyed their conversations. "Tell me about Boston," he asked one evening as she brought him supper. Eleanor settled into what had become her chair. "What would you like to know?" "Everything. I've never been east of the Mississippi." So she told him about the cobblestone streets and grand buildings, the harbor with its forest of masts, the bookshops and theaters. "You must miss it," he observed. "Parts of it," she admitted. "But Boston hasn't been home since my father died." "What happened?" Eleanor hesitated, then decided on honesty. "My father was a merchant. When he died, I discovered he had significant debts. Our house and belongings were sold to satisfy his creditors. His business partner offered to marry me to save me from ruin, as he put it, but he was a cruel man with wandering hands. I chose to seek my fortune elsewhere." Matthew's jaw tightened at her words. "You made the right choice. No woman should have to marry out of desperation." "Isn't that precisely what I've done by answering your advertisement?" she challenged gently. His gray eyes held hers. "Is it?" The question lingered between them. Eleanor found she didn't have a ready answer. As days passed, Eleanor began taking on more responsibilities around the ranch. She discovered she had a knack for bookkeeping and spent several afternoons organizing Matthew's haphazard accounts. "You've got a good head for figures," he commented when she showed him her work. "My father taught me. He believed women should understand business matters." Smart man. 2 weeks after her arrival, Dr. Miller came to check Matthew's progress. "The ribs are healing well," the doctor announced, "and the leg's coming along. I think we can get you up on crutches now, but no weight on that leg for at least another month." Matthew's relief at regaining mobility was palpable. That evening, with Eleanor's help, he made his way to the dining table for the first time since his accident. "It feels good to be vertical," he said as they ate the stew Mrs. Hawkins had left. "I imagine you're not one to lie idle," Eleanor observed. "No, it's been—" He searched for the word, humbling. "How so?" "A man likes to think he's in control of his life, his destiny. Then something like this happens and you realize how quickly it can all change." He looked at her then. "Though in this case, change brought something unexpected and good." Eleanor felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I'm glad my arrival wasn't entirely inconvenient." His low chuckle sent a pleasant shiver through her. "Entirely worth a broken leg, Miss Eleanor." The following days established a new routine. Matthew would join Eleanor for meals and spend afternoons on the porch, supervising ranch activities from a distance and telling her stories of his early days in Montana territory. "I came out in '59 during the gold rush," he explained. "Never found much gold, but I found something better this land. Worked ranch jobs until I saved enough to buy my own place." "And your wife?" Eleanor asked quietly. Jim had mentioned the tragedy, but Matthew never spoke of it. Pain flashed across his face. "Sarah, we married in '66. She died in '67 along with our son." "I'm sorry," he nodded, eyes fixed on the distant mountains. "For a long time I didn't think I'd marry again. Then I saw your advertisement, something in your words." He shook his head. "I can't explain it." Eleanor remembered her carefully composed letter, detailing her skills as a homemaker and her willingness to adapt to frontier life. "What made you respond?" His eyes came back to her face. "You wrote that you were seeking not just security but partnership. That you believed marriage should be a meeting of minds as well as circumstances." A small smile touched his lips. "And then I saw your photograph with those determined eyes and I thought, there's a woman who knows her own mind." "You got all that from a photograph." "Sometimes you just know," he said simply. As spring ripened into summer, Eleanor found herself increasingly at home at Circle K. She planted a vegetable garden beside the house, helped Mrs. Hawkins preserve the first fruits, and even learned to ride from Jim Walsh, discovering an unexpected joy in the freedom of horseback. Matthew's recovery progressed steadily. By early July, he was walking with a cane, his movements still cautious but improving daily. Eleanor found herself watching him when he wasn't aware the careful strength in his hands. the concentration on his face when he was thinking, the rare but transformative smile. One evening, they sat on the porch watching a spectacular sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. "Do you still want to marry me, Eleanor?" Matthew asked suddenly. She turned to him, startled by the directness of the question. "I'm still here, aren't I?" "That's not an answer." His eyes were serious. "You came to marry a stranger because you had few options. Now you've had time to know me. I'm asking if you want this marriage, not if you feel obligated to it." Eleanor considered his words carefully. Over the past weeks, she had come to respect Matthew Kane's quiet strength, his fairness, his unexpected gentleness. "Was it enough? I want to marry you," she said finally. "Not out of obligation or lack of options, but because I believe we could build a good life together." Relief softened his features. "Then if you're agreeable, I'd like to speak to Reverend Thomas when we go into town tomorrow." "Tomorrow." "I have business at the bank, and it's time you saw more of Centralia than just the train station and inn." The next day found them in the wagon heading to town, Matthew driving despite his still healing leg. Eleanor wore her best dress, a blue cotton that brought out the color of her eyes. Centralia looked different in the bright July sunshine than it had during those anxious days of waiting. Matthew pointed out buildings and shared bits of local history as they made their way down the main street. "The town's growing," he observed. "When I first came through, there was just the trading post and a couple of saloons." Their first stop was the bank, where Matthew introduced Eleanor to the manager, Mr. Simmons. She noticed how the man's demeanor changed when Matthew mentioned their upcoming marriage. A new respect entered his eyes as he addressed her. "Mrs. Kane will be a valuable addition to our community," Simmons said, shaking her hand. Mrs. Kane. The name felt strange yet somehow right. After the bank, they visited the general store where Matthew insisted on buying fabric for a new dress. "For the wedding," he explained. At the church, Reverend Thomas welcomed them warmly. "Mr. Kane, good to see you up and about, and this must be your intended." "Eleanor Davis," she introduced herself. They arranged for the ceremony to take place in 2 weeks' time. "Small affair," Matthew told the Reverend, "just ranch hands and a few neighbors." Their last stop was the telegraph office, where Matthew sent messages to his sister in Denver, and Eleanor sent one to her friend Charlotte in Boston, the only person from her old life who still mattered to her. As they prepared to leave town, a commotion near the saloon caught their attention. A man was shouting, his words slurred by alcohol despite the early hour. "Kane, Matthew Kane." Matthew tensed beside her. "Wait here," he said quietly, helping her down from the wagon before turning to face the approaching man. The stranger was well-dressed but disheveled, his face flushed with drink and anger. "Finally found you, Kane. Been looking since Cheyenne." "I don't know you," Matthew replied evenly. "Name's Hargrove. Richard Hargrove. You killed my brother," Eleanor gasped. Matthew's expression remained impassive. "Your brother drew on me first. The sheriff ruled it self-defense." "Self-defense," Hargrove spat. "Jacob was the best shot in Wyoming. He was drunk, like you are now. I'm sober enough to finish what he started." Hargrove's hand moved toward his hip. "Don't," Matthew warned, but he made no move toward his own weapon. The standoff was broken by the arrival of Centralia's sheriff. "Problem here, gentlemen?" "No problem, Sheriff," Matthew answered, his eyes never leaving Hargrove. "Mr. Hargrove was just leaving town." The sheriff looked between them. "That right, mister?" Hargrove's hand hovered near his gun. For a heart-stopping moment, Eleanor thought he might draw despite the sheriff's presence. Then his shoulders slumped. "This isn't over, Kane." "Yes, it is," the sheriff interjected. "I'll escort you to the edge of town myself, Mr. Hargrove. Don't come back." As the sheriff led Hargrove away, Eleanor approached Matthew. His face was like stone. "What was that about?" she asked quietly as they climbed back into the wagon. Matthew waited until they were outside town before answering. 3 years ago in Cheyenne. I was there selling cattle. Jacob Hargrove accused me of cheating at cards. When I walked away, he followed me into the street, drew his gun. I was faster." The simple recounting sent a chill through Eleanor. Will his brother be back? Possibly. Men like that, fueled by revenge and whiskey, don't think clearly. He glanced at her. Does that change your mind about marrying me? Why would it? Because life out here isn't always peaceful. Because I've killed a man and his brother might want to kill me, because you deserve to know what you're getting into." Eleanor considered his words. "My father used to say that character is revealed in how we handle difficulties, not in their absence." She met his gaze steadily. "Your past doesn't change my decision, Matthew." Something in his expression softened. "You're a remarkable woman, Eleanor Davis." They rode in companionable silence for a while before Eleanor asked, "Will you teach me to shoot?" Matthew looked at her in surprise. "You want to learn?" "If I'm to be a rancher's wife, I should know how to protect myself in our home, our home." The words hung between them, a promise of shared future. "I'll teach you," he agreed. The next morning found them behind the barn, where Matthew had set up bottles on a fence post. He handed Eleanor his revolver, showing her how to hold it properly. "It's heavier than I expected," she admitted, adjusting her grip. "Respect the weight," he advised. "Never point it at anything you don't intend to shoot." He stood behind her, adjusting her stance, his hands warm and sure on her shoulders. Eleanor was acutely aware of his proximity, the clean scent of soap and leather that seemed uniquely his. "Now take a breath." His voice was close to her ear. "Let half of it out and squeeze, don't pull the trigger." The gun's report was louder than she expected. The bottle remained untouched. "Again," Matthew encouraged. "You rushed the shot." It took 5 attempts before Eleanor hit her target, but when the bottle shattered, her triumphant laugh rang out across the yard. "Well done," Matthew said, and the pride in his voice warmed her more than the summer sun. Their shooting lessons continued daily. By the end of the week, Eleanor could consistently hit targets at a reasonable distance. "You've a good eye," Matthew told her, "and steady hands." The days leading up to the wedding passed in a flurry of preparation. Mrs. Hawkins helped Eleanor sew her wedding dress from the fabric Matthew had bought, a cream-colored cotton with tiny blue flowers that brought out her eyes. The ranch hands cleaned up the property and built tables for the wedding feast under the large cottonwood tree near the house. The evening before the wedding, Eleanor found Matthew on the porch staring at the sunset. "Having second thoughts?" she asked lightly, joining him at the railing. He turned to her, his expression serious. "No, but I want to be sure you're not." "I'm not," she assured him. "Before tomorrow, there's something I need to give you." He reached into his pocket and produced a small box. "This was my mother's. I want you to have it." Inside the box lay a delicate gold band topped with a small, perfect sapphire surrounded by tiny pearls. "Matthew, it's beautiful." "Like you." He took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. "Eleanor, when you arrived, I told you I didn't need that letter to know you were mine. I meant it. These weeks with you have shown me what I've been missing. You've brought life back to this ranch, back to me." Eleanor felt tears welling in her eyes. "I came west seeking security, a home I never expected to find." "What?" he prompted when she hesitated. "Happiness," she whispered. "A sense of belonging." Matthew's hand cupped her cheek. "May I kiss you, Eleanor?" "I know we should wait until tomorrow," but she silenced him by rising on tiptoe and pressing her lips to his. The kiss began tentatively but deepened as Matthew's arm circled her waist, drawing her closer. When they finally parted, they were both breathless. "I should go in," Eleanor said, though she made no move to leave his embrace. "You should," he agreed, equally motionless with reluctance. They separated. Matthew tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I'll see you tomorrow, Eleanor Davis. Sleep well. Until tomorrow, Matthew Kane." The wedding day dawned clear and warm. From her window, Eleanor could see ranch hands setting up the last of the tables beneath the cottonwood. Mrs. Hawkins bustled in with breakfast and help with dressing. "You make a beautiful bride, miss," the older woman said as she fastened the last button on Eleanor's dress. "Mr. Kane's a fortunate man. Thank you, Mrs. Hawkins, for everything these past weeks." The ceremony itself was simple but moving. Standing before Reverend Thomas with Matthew at her side, Eleanor felt a surety she hadn't expected. When she spoke her vows, the words came from her heart. "I, Eleanor Harper Davis, take thee, Matthew James Kane, to be my lawfully wedded husband." Matthew's voice was steady as he repeated his own vows, his gray eyes never leaving hers. When he slipped his mother's ring onto her finger, his hands were gentle but sure. "I now pronounce you man and wife," Reverend Thomas declared. "You may kiss your bride." Matthew's kiss was tender, almost reverent. The small gathering of ranch hands and neighbors applauded as they turned to face them as husband and wife. The celebration continued into the evening with food, music, and dancing. Eleanor was introduced to neighbors she hadn't yet met, including the Hendersons from the next ranch over, who brought their 5 children and a massive apple pie. "We're so pleased Matthew's finally found happiness again," Mrs. Henderson told Eleanor. "After Sarah died, we worried about him." "He doesn't speak much of Sarah," Eleanor said carefully. "He wouldn't. Matt keeps his pain private, but you've brought light back to his eyes, dear. Anyone can see it." As twilight deepened into night, the guests gradually departed. Jim Walsh, who had clearly enjoyed the whiskey, gave Eleanor a gallant bow. "Mrs. Kane, you've made this the happiest day at Circle K in a long time." Finally, they were alone. Matthew took her hand and led her into the house, their house now, truly. "Welcome home, Mrs. Kane," he said softly, closing the door behind them. Eleanor smiled up at him. "I believe I've been home since the day I arrived." Their first weeks of marriage brought adjustments for both of them. Eleanor moved her belongings into the main bedroom, which Matthew had repainted and furnished with a dressing table he'd ordered from Denver. They settled into new routines together, learning each other's habits and preferences. Matthew's leg continued to heal, and by August he was riding again, though not yet for the long days required during Roundup. Eleanor accompanied him on shorter rides around the property, learning the boundaries of Circle K and meeting the men who worked the line camps. One golden afternoon, they rode to a hilltop overlooking the entire valley. The land spread out before them like a painting, rolling grasslands, stands of pine and aspen, the silver ribbon of the creek winding through it all. "This is my favorite spot on the ranch," Matthew told her as they dismounted. "I came here the day I bought this land and promised myself I'd build something lasting." Eleanor surveyed the breathtaking view. "You've succeeded, only partly." He turned to face her. "A ranch needs more than cattle and grass to truly thrive. It needs future generations to work for." His hands took hers. "Eleanor, I know we haven't spoken of children. Do you want them?" she asked quietly. "Yes," he answered without hesitation, "but after Sarah." He paused, and Eleanor could see the old pain in his eyes. "I need you to know that I would never risk your life. If you don't want children, or if you're afraid, I want children, Matthew," she interrupted gently. "I've always dreamed of a family of my own." The relief in his face was palpable. "Then, God willing, we'll have that together." He pulled her into his arms, his kiss more passionate than any they had shared before. They made love for the first time there on the hilltop, beneath the vast Montana sky. Eleanor discovered a side of Matthew she hadn't yet known, tender yet passionate, considerate of her inexperience but undeniably eager. Afterward, they lay wrapped in his coat, watching clouds drift across the blue expanse above. "I never imagined this," Eleanor murmured, her head on his chest. "What?" That answering an advertisement could lead to such happiness. His arms tightened around her. "When I wrote that letter, I was looking for a practical arrangement, a partnership, as you said in your advertisement." His fingers traced patterns on her bare shoulder. "I never expected to fall in love with you." Eleanor lifted her head to look into his eyes. "You love me." "With all my heart, Eleanor Kane. I think I began falling the moment you walked into my sick room, dignity intact despite waiting 3 days alone in a strange town." Tears pricked her eyes. "I love you too, Matthew, not because you offered me security when I needed it, but because you're the best man I've ever known." Summer faded into autumn, bringing with it the fall roundup. Matthew was fully recovered now and spent long days in the saddle with his men. Eleanor managed the ranch house and continued to oversee the accounts, discovering she had a talent for the business side of ranching. In late September, Richard Hargrove returned to Centralia. Word reached Circle K via a ranch hand who'd been in town. "He's asking questions about you, boss," the young cowboy reported. "Sounds sober this time." Matthew's face grew grave. "Eleanor, I want you to stay at the ranch until this is settled." "What are you going to do?" "Talk to Sheriff Miller, see if we can resolve this peacefully." But Eleanor knew there was more to it than he was saying. That night, as they prepared for bed, she confronted him. "You're planning to meet Hargrove, aren't you?" Matthew sighed. "I won't hide from him, Eleanor. That would only prolong the threat." "Then I'm coming with you." Absolutely not. I'm your wife, Matthew. Your struggles are mine now, too. His expression softened. Eleanor, I couldn't bear it if anything happened to you, nor I you. She took his hands. We'll go together, tomorrow. The next morning, they rode into Centralia side by side. Matthew wore his revolver, and Eleanor had her own smaller pistol hidden in the folds of her skirt, a wedding gift from her husband. They found Sheriff Miller at his office. Kane, I was about to send someone out to your place. Hargrove's been asking all over town for you. I know. Where is he now? Last saw him at the hotel. I warned him against starting trouble. Matthew nodded. I appreciate that, Sheriff, but this needs to end. They found Hargrove in the hotel dining room, alone at a corner table. He looked up as they entered, his eyes narrowing at the sight of Matthew. Kane, he said flatly, finally decided to face me. Mr. Hargrove, Matthew replied evenly. This is my wife, Eleanor. Hargrove's gaze flicked to her briefly. Madam, this doesn't concern you. My husband's welfare very much concerns me, Mr. Hargrove, Eleanor replied coolly. Matthew pulled out a chair for Eleanor before seating himself across from Hargrove. You've been looking for me. Here I am. Hargrove studied him. You killed my brother. In self-defense after he drew on me. There were witnesses. The sheriff's ruling was clear. Jacob was family. My only brother. I understand loss, Mr. Hargrove, Matthew said quietly, but killing me won't bring him back. Maybe not, but justice would be served, Eleanor spoke then. Would it? Your brother chose his path. He drew his gun first. How is it justice to orphan any children we might have because of his poor choice? Hargrove looked taken aback. Children? We hope to start a family, Matthew confirmed, his hand finding Eleanor's beneath the table. Mr. Hargrove, I regret your brother's death. If I could have ended that confrontation differently, I would have, but I won't apologize for defending my life. Hargrove was silent for a long moment. My wife left me after Jacob died, said I was obsessed with revenge. He gave a bitter laugh. Guess she was right. It's not too late to change course, Eleanor said gently. Hargrove looked at her, then back at Matthew. You're a fortunate man, Kane. Your wife speaks sense. He stood abruptly. I'll leave on the afternoon stage. You won't see me again. After he'd gone, Eleanor released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Do you think he meant it? Matthew squeezed her hand. Yes, I saw something change in him when you spoke. His eyes were filled with admiration. You're remarkable, Eleanor Kane. They spent the night at the hotel in Centralia, watching from their window as Hargrove boarded the southbound stage. Eleanor felt a weight lift as the coach disappeared down the road. It's over, Matthew said, his arms encircling her from behind. A new beginning, she agreed, leaning back against his chest. October brought the first frost and news that Eleanor was expecting. Dr. Miller confirmed what she had suspected for weeks, and Matthew's joy was boundless. A spring baby, he marveled, his hand resting gently on her still flat stomach. A new life to match the season. As her pregnancy progressed, Matthew became increasingly protective, insisting on hiring additional help around the house. Mary Chen, the teenage daughter of Chinese immigrants who ran Centralia's laundry, came to work as Eleanor's helper. You must rest, Matthew insisted when he caught Eleanor reorganizing the pantry. I'm with child, not invalid, she protested, but she allowed him to lead her to a chair. Humor me, he said, dropping a kiss on her forehead. I couldn't bear to lose you, Eleanor. She understood then that his concern stemmed from his past loss. You won't lose me, Matthew, I promise. Winter settled over Circle K, blanketing the ranch in snow and confining them mostly to the house. They spent long evenings by the fire, Matthew reading aloud from books Eleanor had ordered from Denver, planning for the baby's arrival. What shall we name him? Matthew asked one night, his hand resting on her growing belly. Him, you're so certain it's a boy, just a feeling. Eleanor smiled. If it's a boy, I'd like to name him James, after your father. Matthew's eyes softened. James Kane, it's a good name. He hesitated. And if it's a girl, what was your mother's name? Margaret. Margaret Kane. Eleanor tested the name. I like it. As spring approached, they prepared the nursery, converting the small room adjacent to their bedroom. Matthew built a cradle, working on it during the long winter evenings, and Eleanor sewed tiny garments from soft flannel. March brought the first signs of thaw and increasing anticipation. Doctor. Miller began making regular visits to check on Eleanor's progress. "Everything looks fine, Mrs. Kane," he assured her after one examination. "Baby's in the right position, should be here in a few weeks." April arrived with green grass and wildflowers dotting the prairie. Eleanor's time drew near, and Matthew rarely left her side, delegating ranch work to Jim Walsh and the other hands. Labor began on a clear morning in late April. Mary Chen ran for Dr. Miller while Matthew held Eleanor's hand through the first contractions. "I'm scared," Eleanor admitted as the pain intensified. "You're the strongest person I know," Matthew told her, his eyes never leaving hers. "You can do this. We'll do it together." The birth was long and difficult. Through hours of pain, Eleanor clung to Matthew's hand, drawing strength from his steady presence. As twilight fell, Dr. Miller's face grew concerned. "The baby's turned," he told Matthew quietly. "I may have to use forceps." Eleanor saw the fear in her husband's eyes and knew he was remembering Sarah. "Matthew," she called, her voice weak from exertion. "Look at me. I'm going to be fine. We both are." He nodded, visibly gathering himself. "I believe you," with Matthew's support and Dr. Miller's skill, their son was born as the first stars appeared in the evening sky. His lusty cry filled the room, and tears streamed down Matthew's face as the doctor placed the infant in Eleanor's arms. "James Matthew Kane," she whispered, touching the downy head. "Welcome to the world." Matthew sat beside her on the bed, one arm around her shoulders, the other hand gently stroking his son's cheek. "He's perfect, like his mother." "He has your eyes," Eleanor observed as the baby blinked up at them. "Poor child," Matthew chuckled, but his voice was thick with emotion. The next few weeks passed in a blur of joy and exhaustion. Little James Jamie, as they began calling him, thrived, growing stronger each day. Matthew was a devoted father, often walking the floor with his son in the night to let Eleanor rest. In June, they took Jamie to Centralia for his christening. The small church was filled with well-wishers, ranch hands, neighbors, townspeople who had come to respect the Kanes. As Reverend Thomas blessed the child, Eleanor looked up at Matthew. The love in his eyes as he gazed at their son made her heart swell. This was what she had crossed a continent to find, not just security or partnership, but a family, a home, a love that grew stronger with each passing day. Summer brought the familiar cycle of ranch work. Matthew was often in the saddle from dawn to dusk, but he always returned to Eleanor and Jamie with stories of the day's adventures. Circle K prospered under their joint management, with Eleanor's careful bookkeeping and Matthew's ranching expertise. One evening in late summer, they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Jamie asleep in Eleanor's arms. The lengthening shadows cast a golden glow over the land they had come to love together. "Do you ever regret it?" Matthew asked suddenly. "Coming west to marry a stranger?" Eleanor smiled, remembering those first anxious days in Centralia, waiting alone for a man she had never met. "Never, not for a moment. Even when I kept you waiting 3 days," she leaned her head against his shoulder. "Especially then. Because when Jim Walsh finally came for me and told me you were injured, I realized something important." "What was that?" "That I already cared what happened to you, that I was relieved you hadn't simply changed your mind." She looked up at him. "And when I first saw you, despite your broken leg and bandages, I thought, there he is. The man I crossed a continent to find." Matthew's arm tightened around her. "I knew the moment you walked into that room, standing so straight and dignified despite everything, that I didn't need that letter to know you were mine." His voice dropped to a whisper. "I think my heart recognized yours." As if sensing the emotion of the moment, Jamie stirred and opened his eyes that matched his father's summer storm gray. Eleanor smiled down at him, then back up at Matthew. "I love you, Matthew Kane. And I love you, Eleanor Kane, more with each passing day." They sat together as twilight deepened, a family forged from courage and circumstance, strengthened by love, with a future as vast and promising as the Montana sky above them. 2 years later, Jamie welcomed a sister, Margaret Eleanor Kane, with her mother's golden hair and her father's determined spirit. The children grew strong in the clean Montana air, surrounded by the love of parents who had found each other against all odds. Circle K expanded, becoming one of the most prosperous ranches in the territory. Eleanor started a small school for the children of ranch hands, teaching reading and arithmetic in the afternoons. Matthew served on the territorial council, helping to shape the laws that would eventually govern the state of Montana. Their love story became something of a legend in Centralia, the Boston lady who had waited 3 days alone, and the rancher who claimed her without needing the letter that had brought them together. But for Matthew and Eleanor, it was simply their life, a partnership that had blossomed into a love deeper and more enduring than either could have imagined when they first exchanged letters across a continent. And on quiet evenings, when the children were asleep and the day's work done, they would often sit on the porch of their home, hands intertwined, watching the sun set over the land that had brought them together, two hearts that had recognized each other across time and distance, finding home at last in each other's arms.